Let me ask you something. Why is it that people living in war zones, people who've lost everything, sometimes their whole family, can often be happier than people scrolling on their phones right here in the comfort of their home, the US or Europe? That's the exact shock my guest today, Dr. Torkil Færø, had when he was faced with coming home after serving Doctors Without Borders in Angola. He said the happiest people he'd ever met were the ones surrounded by devastation, while those of us in comfort, tech, and abundance are bored, anxious, and exhausted. This conversation is going to challenge how you think about health, resilience, and even the way that you live your daily life. Dr. Færø isn't just another physician. He's traveled to over 80 countries, worked in war zones, written national bestsellers, and pioneered research on heart rate variability, what he calls the most important biometric we can measure for health and longevity. And his story gets personal. When his father passed away suddenly, it forced him to confront his own lifestyle, his morality, and sparked the work that wouldn't just change his health, but the lives of thousands of readers and patients worldwide. So if you're busy, stressed, maybe running on caffeine or Red Bulls just to try to keep up, this episode is for you. You're going to learn why most of us are literally dying from the inside out, why sleep is the first domino to knock over if you want to change your life. The one simple prescription that he says can change your lifespan by decades without a pill bottle. Stay with me, because what Dr. Færø reveals could be the wake-up call that you didn't even know that you needed. All right, Dr. Torkil Færø, what an honor to have you on the show. I know that you're a busy person doing a lot of things. We're going to talk about that here in a second. But thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, great to be talking to you, Michael. Looking very much forward to that.
So something that struck me that was very interesting about your history, your life. You're a young person and you've traveled the world. You've had an opportunity to see a lot of things that many people don't often see or get a chance to see. And you've lived as a doctor in war zones.
Yeah, just for a short time, but yes. Mm-hmm.
You've traveled to 80 countries. Is that right?
Yes,
80 countries
that's right.
Traveled to?
Yeah, a bit more, I think, but yeah.
Now it's accumulated a few more. Yeah. And you've seen people, I would assume, kind of at their absolute breaking point. What would you say is the single most important lesson about health and human resilience that almost nobody wants to hear, but everyone probably really needs to?
Oh, that would be a lot of different things. There are some things from the experience in Angola, where I worked for Doctors Without Borders, where I could see that these poor, deprived people had an energy and a zest for life that I could not find at home when I came home. So when I came home for that, I think it was like 5 months or so in the war zone or post-war zone, the biggest shock was coming home and see people, bored, and not finding meaning in life and so on. So that was one of the biggest shocks to me, that while we have all the opportunities that we have today, still we have depression, anxiety, trouble sleeping, feeling exhausted, while we should just be running around wild, just enjoying life and just being happy. But the happiest people were in the war zone. So that is one of the biggest surprises, I would say, in my time. Yeah.
Why would you say that because we have so many things, to your point, we have so many things that gain our attention. Why would you say that people in these war zones were happy in comparison to the way that maybe we live here in the US, or, you live in Norway or areas in your region in Europe? Why is that the case?
Yeah, I was wondering about that. Still do. I think part of it is that they had a very close relationship to death. Half of the people in that town where I was working had been killed in the previous 2 years. Okay, so everybody had lost their family. I interviewed children. I was making a documentary at the time, also interviewed children who had lost 6 of their siblings, their mother and father, and was happy just selling cigarettes and chewing gum on the street. I was happy, smiling, more so than the people at home. Of course, having this big sorrow, but also having the the presence and the ability to enjoy the moment. He said now he was happy. And after such a disaster, it was a kind of resilience that, I don't see much of that at home.
You think, you bring up a good point, and you talk about this in one of your books, about finding joy. Just today, like before we even got on this show, I had one person send me a text message because they had lost a family member. It was one of the reasons why they hadn't gotten back to me. And then in conversation with someone in my neighborhood, had talked about losing his mother recently. And so in both scenarios, they expressed this sentiment about, and this is just me kind of reading their body language and the conversation. They express a sentiment about how they find more joy in doing other things. And I think this happens a lot when people lose someone close to them. They go through this stage where they think about, what am I doing for contribution in society? What am I doing to really live my purpose? And how do I find what I'm doing as joyful? And so, do you think there's any correlation to that? Because we're so busy with being exposed to so much across nations that are highly developed, right? We have all this technology, we have all this stuff that keeps our attention, and we're always constantly being marketed to with all kinds of different things. But yet in these war zones, they may not have that. And so it's a simpler life, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a simpler, more natural life. And also what you said about those people contacting you, it's also probably about post-traumatic growth. That after a traumatic incident of losing someone or being in a life-threatening situation, you appreciate life more, you live differently. So studies on post-traumatic growth shows that after a traumatic event, they take different choices. They appreciate the moment more, as they know that it could have happened otherwise. And I think some of the things that they had in Angola was the natural life that we are developed to live in. They were social, they were together all the time. They were out in the sun, they were dancing, they were working in the fields. They were sleeping at night. There was they couldn't afford having light, of course, in the nighttime. So they would be awake in the day, outside, and inside in the night, sleeping. They would be eating either little, actually, or natural foods. There were no ultra-processed food available to eat, right? And they were moving. If they had to go somewhere, they had to use their feet. If they had to carry something, it would be on their heads, and so on. So, and the sunlight, of course, that we know so much more now, how important the sunlight in itself is for our biological processes inside our bodies. So, and all of this we lack. So they had poverty-driven diseases, and we have wealth-driven diseases and they had the diseases of infection. So we were treating pneumonia, people were dying of malaria, of infections that we could treat or we have vaccines against. And they were, with poor hygiene in the food or in the water and so on. So they were dying of what we were dying from 100, 150 years ago, or even closer than that. At the time when you could be ripped out of life at any time, right? You could be the child mortality rate historically has been 30 to 50%, and that was a percentage that they had there still. And whether you are 5, 15, or 25, at any given time, you could have an infection and you're out. And we have largely cured these diseases now, with vaccines, with antibiotics and so on. But what we die from and suffer from, that is inflammation-based diseases. So we have inflamed bodies from eating the wrong food, sleeping too little, stressing too much, from too much alcohol, too much nicotine, not moving, being too comfortable, not being out in the sunshine, staying up in the evening under artificial light, and toxins. We could go on, right? From what is hurting us a bit at a time. And also, like you said, our attention is for sale. So people with some economic interest are trying to grab our attention 24/7, right? So that distracts us from living our own lives and being in the moment where we actually are, because they pay for us to have our attention to what they're offering somewhere that we are not, and kind of saying to us that you don't have what you need this. That, of course, costs some money, that we have to go to work to get the money to buy something that we may not even need, right? So I think there's part of the solution to that mystery, why they who had nothing seem to be happy, and we who have everything seem to be sad or depressed. I think it's somewhere in that landscape, I think.
So you think it's, you said some things there that are pretty interesting to me. Like the way I thought of this was just like the feedback loop of life and loss. You talked about the traumatic incident that might happen when somebody loses someone and they change the way that they live. And so since that exists, right, if the two people that I spoke to today, they lost, family members, and in due time, a few weeks, a few months, maybe even a year passes, and we seem to get back into the same state that we were before, right? We don't hold on to that. Most people don't anyway. We don't hold on to that idea of someone that we've just lost and we should have spent more time with them. Instead, we just fall right back into our routine, again, having our attention sold, and then getting through this process of constant awareness to other things external. And then when I was thinking about that, I was also thinking that you are making something very clear, which is some of those things in these areas that are a little less fortunate than we are and less developed, they don't have the lights. They don't have maybe they don't have the ability to have refrigerators because they don't have the electricity. And so they are on this natural cycle. Their circadian rhythm kicks in, their biological clock kicks in. The way the body operates and functions internally is of this natural state. So they're receiving sunlight and getting the vitamin D that they need. And their body is processing all of this natural stuff. Yet the things that harm or kill them are of external existence, right? They get a cut or a wound and they get sick. However, what we live through is internal damage. We break things down from the inside out. And how do we get back to a state where we don't have, because it's really hard to find that balance. The work that you do in Doctors Without Borders, you go into these other areas, you help individuals, and it's almost that we're pressing upon those areas, start doing the things that these first world countries are doing. Take these vaccines, do these things. And it's evolutionizing those countries, right? Trying to make them more like these first world countries. But are we doing more harm than good? Where is the balance? Where's the tipping point? You get so far in, and then all of a sudden now their attention is being sold. And then now they're breaking down internally to the external. And they're having disease caused by inflammation versus disease from something else. Are we really doing the right thing?
Yeah, they seem to be going straight from these poverty-based diseases and straight into the wealth diseases, because I think a lot because of the food. So they start getting the ultra-processed food. They also tend to spend more time inside. They also have the cheap entertainment of having, cheap Chinese phones and being on YouTube and sitting still rather than moving and so on. So they seem to be getting a lot of the same diabetes and so on, obesity, and going straight from from having the poverty diseases and straight into our kind of diseases, it seems. So I don't know what's happening, but it's the way that people want to live. But what's important is that we can move a little bit into that direction. We don't need to move all the back to the savannah and go half naked and with bows and arrows and so on. But we need to be a little bit more in the sunshine. We need to dim the lights at night and to sleep well for 7 to 8 hours. We need to exercise somewhat and move daily and then throughout the day, evenly, I would say. And need to eat real food, whole foods, food that our great grandmothers would recognize as something edible. And so there are lots of things we can do to live a little bit more naturally. And what I'm talking about, in you mentioned the book, The Pulse Cure, is that the modern day wearables, like the Garmin watches or Whoop bands and Oura rings, points into that direction, so that the more we can live like those ancestors and those people in Angola, of course, except for the violence, the healthier we will be. So then we could get both things, right? We could be, having this luxurious life that we really have, almost all of us, and also be happy, because we would live in tune with our biology and not against it, as most people do.
It's amazing to me that, I'm a victim of the same state that probably everyone listening to this is which is the constant go mentality. You are always doing something, less aware of maybe the current state that you're in, or appreciating the current moment that you're in. And we all do this, and we're highly distracted. And it seems like a very, very simple solution. The unfortunate thing is that we've had to come up with these technologies, a smartwatch that can tell you, hey, you need to start sleeping now, or you didn't sleep enough. Because it really is just a simple prescription, right? Sleep more, eat healthy, get sunlight, be active. But we're not doing much of that. And it seems that we need doctors like you to tell people to do those things. And it's almost lost in consciousness that, I really should be exercising. I really should be eating healthier whole foods versus this processed stuff. How do you convert someone's attention and thought process to naturally go in that direction? Because something must have happened to you, right? I mean, can all of us go travel to 80 countries or more, become a doctor and go see some of these things that you've seen in order to have such a huge impact internally on the way that you think, that you go, I have to change the way that I do things. And now I need to go tell other people about this stuff. What happened to you, or I would say what occurred during these types of trips that made you think, I have to take a different approach to medicine. I have to live my life differently. What was that moment?
That did not directly have anything to do with the trips, but it was on a trip, because I was planning, or we were on a 4-year sailing trip with my family. We were 1 year into the trip. We were by the Panama Canal, just about to go through and into the Pacific with our own catamaran. And I got a text message from my family saying that my father was in the hospital and had gotten cancer. And it was of the serious kind. And he had been on the boat just 1 month earlier in the Caribbean. And I couldn't see anything wrong. Maybe in hindsight, I could have seen maybe. But anyway, so, and he lived for another 3 months. So it was like 4 months since I saw him on the boat until he was in the grave, right? And from cancer. And then I took a look at myself and my lifestyle. And I took a look at my other ancestors. I could see that I would get nothing for free when it comes to genetics and longevity. So I just thought that, okay, It seems like I have to do some other stuff. I was weighing 40 pounds more than I do today. I was not exercising, not caring about sleep, not really caring about my health at all. As I didn't have any symptoms, no diseases, just enjoying life, just traveling around the world, as you said. And suddenly I understood that if I continue this lifestyle, I may continue to do this for maybe 20 years. But if I want to travel to as many countries that I really want to visit and do the things I want to do, then I must change my lifestyle into a healthier one. So then I started studying how to create health, something that we did not learn in medical school, oddly enough. We learned how to diagnose and understand and treat disease, but how to keep people healthy or yourself healthy, we did not learn much about that. That was not on the curriculum. I don't think we even thought it mattered much. It mattered some. I would have the impression that if I did everything right and spent a lot of concentration and time living a healthier life, I may live 3 or 4 years longer, maybe. And those years, maybe they were the ones at the nursing home. So I even bother. That was the thinking. And then I, of course, understood that, okay, there are decades to get. And a huge American study shows that there's like 24 years of extra life to gain if you do the right things from when you do all the wrong things. And I could check off a lot of wrong things, right? I was drinking 2-3 glasses of wine every day, using a kind of nicotine we use in Norway that you put under your lips, smoking occasionally, and so on. So I was doing a lot of the wrong things. So everything that I'm writing about in my book that I give as advice on how to do things was things that I had to find out for myself, for myself to become healthier and live longer. And then, somehow along the way, I ended up writing books about this and best-selling books, but in the original start was for me to live longer, for me to live healthier. So, and also somewhere along the way, I got aware that we have this thing called heart rate variability, and that our heart, of course, really what I should have understood as a doctor, because we use the pulse, the heart rate all the time to measure the state of a patient. It's what I do every day at the ER. And the heart rate variability is also a more precise measurement of the state of your body, the state of your mitochondria, the state of your autonomic nervous system. So it's kind of suddenly getting a dashboard to what goes on inside you, under the hood, inside your body. And of course, the pulse, the heartbeat is the first thing you check. If you see people on the street, are they alive? You go and check the pulse. If they're lying on the ground, are they alive even? And what quality has the pulse? And now we have these technology that keeps track of that at all times. And they don't only check the pulse, they check the other things that I check at the ER. They check the temperature, the level of oxygen. And in addition to what I can check at the ER, they check the pattern of movement, day and night. Are you moving? Is your pattern of movement, the intensity of it, compatible with health or not? Using millions of users' data to make algorithms and artificial intelligence to show you, okay, what is helpful for you. And luckily for most people, it's more or less the same thing, like we have been talking about: moving, sleeping, having a way to calm yourself down, whether that is breath work or reading or going for walks or whatever. Once you start to do these things in a better, balanced way, it becomes visible and understandable, through this technology and the heart rate. So, and that is also why I'm quite optimistic when it comes to healthcare, because I come from the kind of healthcare that Peter Attia calls medicine 2.0, where you wait until you get sick and then you treat everybody with the same medicine that is kind of the average, of some researchers has found. Now, instead of waiting till you get sick, we're at what Peter Attia calls medicine 3.0, where you take personalized medicine and you start, improving your health so that you don't get sick from these modern day diseases. So this is a way to get personalized medicine, because how different people respond to different things is a huge variation in that. How you and I respond to alcohol, for example, could be very, very different. I cannot really tolerate it at all. It's just a disaster, for several days. And when it becomes measurable, then it's easier. You can manage what you measure, right? If you didn't have insight into the economy, you wouldn't be able to go to the store and know if you have money to buy. And if you don't have price tags on the things in the store, you wouldn't have no idea what to buy, right? So this is something that gives you the power to take control of your own health, and that you have control and not the doctor after you get sick. So it's actually quite a huge shift, and that there is money on the kind of the front side of the disease to avoid getting sick in the first place, I think is quite important.
I always used to say, when I had my personal training business and we were across multiple locations, one of the things that I found to maybe get the individuals that were sitting across from us when they were thinking about fitness or health or training was that you had two options. You could either pay for your health now, or you could pay for it later. And usually the later portion of paying for your health meant that it was typically more expensive. Longevity of your life was a lot less. And those later years, to your point, was usually in like a nursing care facility. So it wasn't a higher quality of life, but you were also paying more. So you had two options. It was either pay for it early and live a longer, higher quality of life, or pay for it later at a much increased rate and a lower quality of life. And that's how I've always looked at it. But the thing that I thought was interesting, you mentioned that the last time I read any study on longevity, it was several years ago, probably published in a very similar journal. But it was, if you did those things, right, exercised and ate well and did all these things, you increased your lifespan by 12 years. And it was a 12 years of quality lifespan. It wasn't just like 12 more years and you get to sit in a nursing home 12 more years longer. And you mentioned that it's 24 years longer. Is that also 24 years longer with an increased quality of life, not just, 12 years are the good ones and then 12 more years are, not so good.
Yeah. So also with quality of life. And those 24 years is if a male start when they are 40. The good thing is that if you start from your 60, it's 18 extra years. So that means you're kind of more than doubling your time on Earth, right? So, and it goes from if you do the wrong things until they do the right things. And the factors are, physical activity, sleep, having some way to manage your stress, keeping your consumption of alcohol low, not smoking, having good relationships, and then good nutrition. And it was also to not use opioids. Those were the 8 factors that if you did those wrong, you had poor relationships, you were smoking, you were drinking too much, you were eating crap food and so on. Okay, if you go from there to doing the right things, that is when you gain those 24 years. So say that a person who did average, that would probably be a person who gained 12 years, right? If they were okay, for example, did 4 out of the 8 areas and so on. So, but if you go from doing everything wrong to everything right, there's a 24 years extra time. And that is also what I can see as a clinician. In Norway, I've had more than 100,000 consultations. I've seen about 1% of the Norwegian population. And then I can see that if you do everything wrong, you would be lucky to get into your 70s and at least to be healthy and have any kind of vitality. And if you do everything right, you have a good chance of getting into your 90s and still have the vitality and doing and having a clear mind and then the ability to do things that you like to do. So I can see that also in practice and not only in the research.
You mentioned opioids. So a lot of physicians, I see this with individuals, like they stress, they feel anxiety, depression. So the mental illnesses or sicknesses that physicians will prescribe for, but also the physical illnesses. A lot of times providing prescription medication for those types of situations also has an impact on the physical body. And then they get to a point where maybe they're listening to the show or they're listening to something similar to it. And they go, well, my time is lost, right? I've been taking these medications for years. I've been drinking for years and smoking for years. My body is broken and worn down, and I'm in my 50s or 60s. I have no chance of recovering from this. So are you saying that the research that you've reviewed and patients you've seen indicates that you truly could reverse almost 100% to having, back to healthy liver, back to healthy kidneys, back to healthy gut biome, back to healthy skin, back to healthy joints, like all of those things that kept them in sickness because physicians were providing prescriptions because that was the solution, right? Can they get back to this natural state where they don't need those things anymore?
At least it depends, of course. It wouldn't necessarily fix kidney failure, for example, or if you already have, your arteries are, stuffed with atherosclerosis, you wouldn't necessarily get that away, but you would get, that is probably when you have the most to gain from changing your lifestyle. Where we earlier used to think that, okay, if you're 60, 70 years old, okay, then it doesn't really matter what you do. But that is when it really matters what you do, in my experience. And that is when, according to that research, if you did the right things, then from you were 60 compared to those who did the wrong thing, that was an 18 years difference in there. So absolutely, we have a body that is, working hard underneath our skin, constantly. There's like trillions of processes going on all the time. We are making the same amount in ATP, the currency, energy of our bodies. We're making more or less our own weight in ATP every day. That is just consumed and recircled and so on. So it's just intense activity, and the better mitochondria that you have, the better lifestyle.
If you've made it this far into the episode, thank you. I don't take your time or your attention lightly. So if anything that I've shared today has sparked an idea, challenged you in any way, maybe challenged your perspective on things, or just helps you see your business a little differently, I'd love for you to do two quick things. First, head over to YouTube, search Sweat Success Podcast, and hit that subscribe button. Next, please go to bizops.com. I've put together a handful of free resources there that you can download to help you grow your business, improve your systems, and create real freedom. They're all available right now. There's no strings attached. I just appreciate you being here. Let's get back to the show.
We'll get a lot of these cells that were struggling back into order because a lot of the diseases that we are treating is a lack of energy, poor mitochondria, and that our brain is the organ that really needs excellent mitochondria, right? So that is why sleeping well, getting into the sunshine, all of this improves the function of our mitochondria, the powerhouses in the cell. That also proves to do much more than just providing the power. They're also communicating and, in the operation of being us, so to speak, it's quite a complex society inside of us.
Would you say that the heart rate variability, if you were to break it down for someone to understand this, is just understanding that your heart rate varies, and the more varied it is. So for example, if I'm sitting here having this conversation with you, my heart rate is, let's say, 50 beats per minute. And then if later in the day I'm doing the exact same activity and my heart rate is now 70 beats per minute, nothing's changed. Those are indicators to maybe take a look at to understand what's going on internally, what's going on at the root of your body. Is that Is that a kind of a better or a definition that could be used to explain heart rate variability?
No, it's not. It's quite a bit different than that. It's
Could you
about
explain it?
how, yes. So heart rate variability is a variation between heartbeats in real time, like while I'm talking, for this half a minute. So if I'm in the calm state, then when I breathe in and the lungs fill with oxygen, the heart rate goes up a little bit, measured in milliseconds, hardly detectable. You can, if you're really calm, feel it, that there's like a wave form to the pulse. It goes up and down in speed. You breathe in, your lungs are filled with oxygen. It goes a little bit faster. You breathe out, there's less oxygen, and the heart rate slows down a little bit. Maybe 20 milliseconds, maybe 50 milliseconds, not much, but detectable. But when you are stressed from whatever reason, whether you have been eating the wrong food, you've been having alcohol, you've been sleeping poorly, you're quarreling with your wife, you have been training too much, it's the week before menstruation, for example, for women, then the body is in the stressed state. And then the heart beats at a very steady, just like a metronome, just like an old-fashioned clock. It beats very steadily. And that is a sign that our organism just thinks that, okay, we need to use all available forces, even now that there's less oxygen in the lungs, because we don't know if this organism will survive. Because this is like 100, 200 or more million years old system. The foundation of our physiology and nervous system. It still kind of works like it did for rats and other animals, which is why we can use them for research, right? And that is why these heart rate monitors can check whether you are in the stress state or in the restful state, and to what degree, and 24/7. So they keep track of you and the intensity of your life while you're busy living your life. And that is the value of it. And of course, if we lived more like our ancestors, like we were talking about, then we would be in activity 3-4 hours a day, and then we would rest and kind of just hang around and sleep when it's dark and so on. And that is the intensity that we are constructed for. And that even at full capacity, when you have the sunlight, when you have the real food and everything that we talked about. So when we have a lower physiological capacity and then too much stress, that is when we get the inflammation in the body. And when we have the inflammation in the body, that is just constant stress. So if we have a low capacity, our body is working hard all the time and will be constantly in the stress state, kind of in overdrive all the time. And that will lead to disease, because when we are in that state over time, what gets, in trouble as the immune system, because there will be less available resources for the immune system to do its job. Because to do the job properly for the immune system, you need to be in the restful state for enough time. And most people will not be in that condition, right? So that is how heart rate variability works, and why it's such a probably the most important biometric we have. And the good thing is that we then have control of it and access to it.
So when we're taking a look at heart rate variability, the reality is you want variability. You want
variability. Variability is a sign that you have capacity. That it's just like if you're driving your car at least the shift stick cars that we often have later in Norway, is that I can drive sometimes if I'm distracted in my own thoughts. When I had that kind of a car, I could drive in third gear, right? And suddenly I'm driving at 60, 70 miles an hour, and the engine is just going at 3,000 or 4,000 RPM. And then I understand that, okay, I put it into fifth gear or sixth gear. Okay, and then I have the same speed, but the engine is running at 1,500 RPMs, right? So it's like so that's the analogy. So you're kind of working too hard. Your body is struggling too hard for daily activities.
So you mentioned using these tools and gadgets and offline here before the show. You and I were kind of talking about, you asked me the question, do I have any gadget? Do I have any of these tools that I wear? And there's some, I don't know if it's really theory because they've proven it, but is there really benefit to wearing some of these devices when you look like your phones have these microwaves that they send out? The devices and technology that you wear are doing the same thing. And so there's this idea that having too much technology around you prevents you from sleeping or having good restful sleep. And by doing so, you obviously, to your point, without proper rest, your body's in this stress or tension state. So does it really make sense to be having these gadgets? Should someone actually wear them because it's counterproductive? You want to measure your HRV to see how well you're sleeping and whether or not you do have heart rate variability, and check and measure if your body's in this stress state. Is it better just to not do those things, just to turn the lights off, not have any technology around you, and go to bed?
Yeah, of course. And my editor on the Pulse Cure was very particular about that. You wouldn't need a device to make use of it because you can just do the things that those who have the devices find out it's useful. And there's some individuality, of course. There may be some food, for example, that you don't tolerate, that I tolerate, and so on. But most of the time, it's the same things that disturbs us. So of course that's possible. But also these gadgets usually have a flight mode. At least my Aura and Garmin has a flight mode, which means that when they're in the flight mode, they did just work on their own, just sending out light, green or red light, and just sensing it back again. And then you can decide, okay, now I want to transfer the information to my phone. And then you can put on the Bluetooth and take it out of flight mode. And you may even leave the room if you want to while this in the, half a minute or so that the transfer information goes into your phone, right? So it shouldn't really be a practical problem, I think, and at least not compared to the everything else that we are surrounded with. So, and people find it so useful. And I have not seen anyone not becoming surprised by what they learn from their body, from the heart rate. And the reason why we learn so much, and because so many people think that, okay, why can't we just feel it? And we can't. We are really, really poor at feeling our inner stress. And the reason for that is that it has never been necessary. Throughout evolutionary times until the latest decades, it was never, your inner stress was never the problem. All the threats to your life and longevity and disease came from the outside, from an animal that's chasing you, or food that is contaminated, or smoke in the distance that you have to run away from a forest fire or whatever. And we have excellent senses towards those threats. We can see like a million different shades of color and almost the same amount of sounds and smells and so on. And but whether I have 80 or 60 in heartbeat right now, I have no clue. And there's no sense for that. And if we had the same acute senses for this, we would feel 100th of a heartbeat, in raised stress levels. But the problem, and that maybe would be useful now, but throughout history, that would just disturb you from listening to the twig cracking, from an animal that's chasing you. So you would be eaten first if you have a very well developed sense for your inner stress. You're out of the game, right? So we can't really feel this. So this is kind of a substitute for a sense that we never needed to develop. And that is why it's useful. And I haven't met yet anybody who hasn't found something very, very surprising about what they found. And certainly I found lots of surprises because in medical school, we learned about the autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic, stressful fight, flight, and freeze, and the parasympathetic recovery state, which is called rest and digest. And as I was never scared, I would just assume that, okay, I have to be in the parasympathetic state all the time. But of course, once I started checking, I saw I was in the stress state all the time. But it didn't have anything to do with mental stress or anxiety or these kind of things. It was food. It's turned out I didn't tolerate gluten or flour-based food very well. I didn't tolerate milk very well. Not to the extent that it was giving me any symptoms, but I could feel more drained of energy, and my heart rate would show that. Other things, the nicotine I was using that I thought was calming me down was just a disaster for the stress levels. It would raise my heart rate my normal heart rate, not the variability, 10 to 15 points. The alcohol that I was drinking, I would do that even coming home from a busy evening shift at the ER. Thinking, it's so useful now with 1 or 2 glasses of wine to calm myself down, and of course, that is the most stressful thing you can do, drinking alcohol. According to Whoop, that is the biggest stressor of all. And that is what I use to calm myself down. So that kind of shows how mixed up it becomes, how hard we have to identify what stresses us and so on. So these were the kind of stressful things. And what I used to think was stressful, which was working at the ER, that is the most calm state that I'm in. So the heart rate gives you a lot of surprises, I would say. And if you're worried about it, just try it for like 3 months and see what happens. What do you learn? And then put it away. And if you're all good, then you don't need to change anything. But most people have found, possibilities for improvement. Yeah, when it comes to sleep, what to do. For example, they would find out that eating before you go to bed is a terrible choice. Eating, usually then people stop eating 3 hours before they go to bed. They see that candy is stressful, something that neither me or anyone would think have anything to do with stress. You're just eating candy. My wife went to the movies last night and had, didn't eat dinner, thought, I'll just have some candy. And her stress levels throughout the night, it's just horrible. And the good thing about Garmin is that it gives you a body battery. So she had kind of a body battery at 30 when she woke up today because of the candy. Otherwise,
for this is people will, have some kind of like caffeine or something to or taurine, something to really enhance their energy levels, right? Because they feel that physically, and then they go to something else, which actually might be more problematic.
Yeah, and then they drink Red Bull and take caffeine, and then they disturb the sleep again. So you have this vicious cycle that goes on. So yeah.
What for the listeners and people who are watching this, they know that they're living out of alignment. The ones who know that they're living out of alignment, whether it's the wrong job or bad health habits, wrong relationships, but they're in a position where they're just way too afraid to change. That seems to be kind of like a consistent pattern with a lot of individuals. What's the first domino that they could push over to start seeing positive improvement?
Getting good sleep, prioritizing getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep, and then that means you need maybe 30 minutes more than that in bed, because we're talking about effective sleep, actual sleep. And that would mean that you would need to go and calm down before you go to bed. You need to dim the lights, maybe a couple of hours before. You need to not drink alcohol, not eat before you go to bed. You need to have the bedroom cool, 60 to 65 degrees. You need to have your bedroom totally dark so that you cannot see a hand in front of you. So you may need to paint, or put some wallpaper on the walls to make it dark enough. Many people have white walls in the bedroom, just a little stream of light, and it's all is all lighted. So that would probably be the first thing. And when you start getting control of your sleep, you get more energy to do the more things that need more willpower and more effort, like exercise, but you don't need to do much exercise to get the benefits in health. Maybe half an hour brisk walking every day should be enough. So get your body moving and move your body regularly throughout the day. Maybe just for a minute or two. Just take some push-ups, take some squats, go up and down the stairs. You just get some circulation. That is what our body expects, and that is kind of the intensity that is made for it to be able to do its job, right? So that would be the things. And then, of course, minimizing alcohol. And so those would be important steps. And trying to identify what kind of food you can tolerate, and to restrict your feeding window to maybe 8 hours, and then be fasting outside of that.
You've done something interesting that I don't think a lot of individuals, because you carry over, you're kind of a creative person as well. You didn't just stay in this this pattern of being a physician and then following the medicine protocol of prescribing when someone has disease. You also carry into this creative area where you're a photographer, and you've not just written about health, but you've written about photography as therapy. And it sounds quite abstract, coming from a physician who's talking about this. How does holding a camera heal someone?
It's probably more about how you do it, because in parallel, because I've been a freelancer as both a photographer and a physician all my life, my working life. So I've been teaching workshops 60 places all around the world, in Cuba, in Sri Lanka, in Ethiopia, in many places. And I could see that how you approach the moment, how you grab the moment, that, the principles for succeeding will be the same whether you need a good picture as a result or a good life or health as a result. So it's the same approach to a problem or a possibility. So you need to think right. You need to be present in the moment. You need to grab the chances that comes your way. You need to prepare for luck. You need to have grit. You need to continue even though it's hard, for example. So it's the mindset, I would say. So the camera cure, that is unfortunately not translated into English, but it's a Norwegian bestseller, is about to practice these kind of principles. And instead of using it in real life, which can be hard and abstract, it's then a specific task that you are going to approach, taking a certain picture in this mindset, with this awareness and the presence. So, and of course, I also see that because I saw that photographers, they were so healthy compared to the patients and other people. And now that I'm writing a book on sun exposure, I can see that part of it was probably the sun exposure. Because if you're a photographer, where are you? You're of course outside, using the sunlight, and particularly often the morning sunlight, which seems to be the most effective ones of the day, right? So that's probably a part of it. So it's a good way to move around, to move your attention, to use your senses, to use all of your nervous system and physiology and your mind. And then also, when you're doing it, you're outside in the sunlight, or at least if you're photographing outside then. So that is how. And of course, we are hunter-gatherers. Our minds are hunter-gatherers' minds. And doing photography is an act of hunting for pictures and gathering them. And when you can do that also on workshops, and together with other people, you also have the social thing about it.
Because you also wrote The Rest Cure.
Mm-hmm.
Your life is very interesting from the lens today that you look at, because not many physicians are in this multifaceted approach of experiencing and exploring life. Much of what you do, I think, is very similar to the way that Greeks would maybe teach how you might live, through medicine and through social activity and interaction. And studying through art and studying through history. And you're doing a lot of those things today, which was kind of the prescribed way of living years ago. You look at Leonardo da Vinci. I mean, he was, also a world-renowned artist and physician. So you have all this experience. And if you could take like a practical takeaway from your vantage point, what's the one rest ritual every high performer person should really build into their week if they want to live long term?
Yeah, that would be easy. That would be breath work. That would be being able to slow down your breath. There would be several ways, to box breathing and coherent breathing and many different ways of doing it. But the main principle is breathing slow. So maybe breathing 6 times a minute or so to calm yourself down. It's kind of a physiological way to tell your body that things are calm out there and the body can relax. And you can do that all the time. If you're in a meeting, if you're in a conversation, even as you're walking inside the store doing the shopping, you can calm yourself down by using the breath and slowing the breath down because it's invisible. Whether whether you would be breathing slower right now, I wouldn't be able to tell, of course. So it's and it's always there. It's always available. Even at night, if you wake up in the middle of the night and you have some nightmares, so you can calm yourself down by using your breath. So that would be the main thing.
6 breaths a minute. What's the cadence on that?
That would be maybe 4 seconds in, 6 seconds out would be preferable. That your out breath your exhale is a little bit longer than your inhale. That would be the ideal. But there would be many different things, and there would be apps to train yourself, and it could be useful to sometimes do like a 10 minutes breath work. But I think the most important is to do it maybe 1 minute, every half hour, or spread out through the day, or when you need it, when you feel stressed, that you have this way of controlling your stress levels.
Or when your Garmin or your Whoop is telling you, hey, you're stressed.
Yeah, for example, it would say that, okay, you're too stressed, your heart rate is high. Yeah, it could be.
If you could give the listeners or viewers one prescription, not a pill, but a lifestyle prescription that would extend their life and expand their joy, make them happier, what would that be?
That's also easy. That would be to go outside and being in nature. Try to do it for at least half an hour a day.
Can they have their phones with them?
No, they're in flight mode.
So turn it off.
Yeah.
I'll be scrolling.
Yeah, not to be disturbed. Not to be disturbed. Being outside under the sunlight, enjoying nature, because that calms us down. Yeah. So and there are lots of benefits from that. Yeah, you move, get sunlight, your eyes will be moving about. You're using your senses, so there will be lots of benefits from that. So
you kind of get everything in one.
Yeah.
Before we close here, first, I just really appreciate you being on because you have a lot of wisdom, a lot of experience, and a lot to share. But you've worked in war zones. You've written bestsellers. You're writing another book, right? You've changed a lot of people's lives. And when people look back at your work, your family and just people who've gotten to know you or people who've learned about you, what do you hope that they say that you stood for?
I'm not sure. I was thinking so much about that. Maybe I would just, if they said that was a fun guy to be with, that would be probably be the best thing. Of course, if it helped people live better lives, that would be great as well. So, but most of the people like to be around me. Maybe I'll be happier by that, I think.
I like that. Dr. Torkil, where can people find, you're right, when is this new book going to be available?
Oh, I'm not sure because I need to get it out in Norwegian first, and then hopefully it will be, I make it good enough so it will be in English also. So, but they can reach me on Dr. doc.torkil, doc.torkil. That's my English one. I also have a Norwegian one, dr.torkil, that I can be reached. But of course, there will be some Norwegian content there. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook as dr.torkil. So,
Yeah, we'll definitely put all those links in the show notes so people have access to them. Dr. Torkil, it's been a true pleasure to have you on. And for everyone listening, you find this of value, really consume the information and make a change. Do some of these things that Dr. Torkil's giving you as a prescription without you having to go to the doctor in person and get maybe a bottle of medicine. He's giving you the medicine right here.
And of course, one more thing. Of course, the book The Pulse Cure is available. Also as an Audible, so they can get the information there.
You can listen to it.
I forgot. Yeah.
And if you're finding this of value, then please share it with other people because we're all in this together. We're all on this planet together, and the more that we learn and the more that we share, the better our lives are. So enjoy those moments, and we'll see you guys on the flip side.